Transport Department is consulting on the possible end of imperial measurements for width and height on our roads without the metric equivalents being shown alongside. It's considering a dual system in which, let's say, the height of a bridge at 12 foot 9 inches would have alongside, in brackets, 3.8 metres. I did check, so don't email me. One of the arguments is that more than 10% of collisions with bridges involve foreign lorries. That's rather higher than you would expect proportionately, given the percentage of the traffic that they represent. We're joined by Robin Pace of the UK Metric Association. It campaigns for full metrication. Derek Clark, a UKIP MEP for the East Midlands, takes quite a different view. Mr. Clark, what would be wrong with this? After all, if people are more used to thinking in metres, from purely a safety point of view, surely it would make sense.
Yes, hello, and good morning to you.
Hello.
I'm glad Robin Pace is there, because, you see, he is now in favour of metrication right through. But if you look at the British Weights and Measures website, you'll see that they're not in favour of it. At least they weren't 6 months ago. And they even talk about the same principle that we sometimes...
Well, Mr. Pace, I may have misrepresented. Mr. Pace can talk for himself, but let me just ask you, first of all, a very specific one on this. Why not have alongside a metric measurement for something where it is a safety issue?
I'm not against a metric equivalent alongside in smaller characters, but good enough for people to read. But it's the thin end of the wedge. The government say they've no plan to replace imperial with metric until the majority of drivers have been educated in metric. And they reckon that will happen by about 2010. So it's the good old EU principle of start something off, leave it lying fallow, gradually work people around to it, and then bring it in.
Well, you say it's an EU principle, but of course children in schools here now think in centimetres and metres, don't they? Pretty well exclusively. And they even can do their height in metres, which I have to say I couldn't off the top of my head. So it's happening, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but only because we're being forced into doing it. If we were left alone, we wouldn't be doing it. That's the whole point. It's in itself, it's perhaps insignificant, but it's all part of the EU process of drawing us in to a continental mindset. That's what it is.
Would you still like to be buying things in the shop for 19 and 11 pence halfpenny?
Interesting. When metric money came in, that was done all of a sudden. There wasn't too much consultation. There was plenty of stuff in the newspapers. And when it came in as a bang. But you see, metrication on the roads hasn't been done that way. It's been done little, by stealth.
Okay.
And that's what I've got against it.
Right. Robin Pace of the UK Metric Association. Where do you stand on this?
Well, we welcome this fairly modest proposal. We think it's just common sense and a safety measure, and indeed the DFT's figures show that it would also result in cost savings, because bridge strikes, and that's the background to this, of course, bridge strikes are very expensive, both in terms of damage to bridges and the delays that it causes and diversion of trains and all that sort of thing.
Well, Mr. Clark said he's not against anything on safety measures, but what he objects to is what he calls the thin end of the wedge. That this is creeping metrication, and there are people sitting there in the superstructure, in the bureaucracy, who can't wait for the day when everything is metric and the good old mile is gone.
Well, indeed, it would be a good thing if we had one single system which everybody used for all purposes. It's really not sensible in one single country to try to struggle along with two systems at the same time.
Americans seem to get on quite well with it.
I don't know why you mention America. I mean, they've hardly started on the metrication process.
but there are some metric things in the States, quite a lot of metric things, but there's no sign of them changing from miles.
Well, actually, they do permit metric signposts. There are a few states in America which...
I think you'd have to look pretty hard to find them.
You would, but it is permitted, and this is the only country in the world which actually bans metric measurements on road signs, apart from width and restriction signs.
Mr. Clark?
Well, interesting you should mention America. In Arizona, they've had 3 decades worth of metric signs on the roads. They've just torn them all up because the drivers were frustrated and gone back to imperial, or rather American measurements. So, you see, the American experience is exactly contrary to what Mr. Pace is saying.
But, I come back to the question with you. You say it's a creeping system. Does that mean you'd like to put the clock back and get pounds, shillings and pence back? I mean, by your argument, why not?
We're very well used to decimal currency, and that's fine. Like I said just now, it's brought in after a bit of consultation, all at one go. I deeply suspect all these measures, which are being brought in stealthily, little by little. If metrication is good for us, why don't we bring it all in one fell swoop, just like that, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Right.
They didn't.
Well, Mr. Pace, you'd want it brought in at one fell swoop, wouldn't you?
Yes, I welcome that statement from Mr. Clark. Yes, I mean it should have been done as it was in Australia within a 10-year period, and it's dragging it out over 4 or 5 decades.
So your message is get a move on.
Well, indeed, yes.
And your message to Mr. Clark is slow down.
Get rid of it altogether. It's part of the Europeanisation of this country, which the vast majority of the people of this country do not want. Look at marketplaces. People like to buy their stuff in pounds and ounces, and the fine on Janet Devers for doing so is absolutely disgraceful.
OK, Derek Clark, UKIP MEP for the East Midlands, and Robin Pace of the UK Metric Association, thank you very much indeed.